Hello everyone, welcome to the news desk here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. Rich Hagan alongside Ian Duke from Inside R&D. Ian, no better person to have beside me to walk us through the intricacies of Eldritch Moon draft. And we're going to talk about the allied pairs of colours. What does that even mean?
So the allied colours are those that sit next to each other on the colour wheel.
So we're going to start white-blue, blue-black, black-red, red-green, green-white. Those are our five. Okay, tomorrow, if your enemy colours are your thing, we'll do plenty of that too. So, right now, let's start off with white-blue, and let's take a look at the overview of what white-blue is trying to do, and it's spirits.
Yeah, so we'll call it spirits here, but it's also sort of a classic blue-white flyers deck. Hold the ground with high toughness creatures that don't have flying and get in through the air with flying creatures. There's also a few cards that take advantage of the spirit creature type and a few creatures that have entered the battlefield abilities that you can either return to your hand or blink in and out of play to get more value.
Are those spirit-dependent cards mostly at higher rarities in general?
Yes, mostly at higher rarities.
Okay, so why don't we take a look at the commons that you're picking. So right now, this is, as you see at the bottom, if you like, our legal disclaimer, our most frequently first through fifth picked commons among draft winners on Magic Online. So it's not just pick one, this is what goes 1 through 5. What stands out to you, Ian?
So Choking Restraint's just a great removal spell. We'll kind of bypass that one. Next up is Tattered Haunter. This is one of the best blue commons, just an efficient flyer, gets in for 2 damage turn early in the game. It's also a spirit. Just great card to add to any blue deck, and especially the spirits deck. After that is Sigardian Priest, which is sort of a classic thing in this blue-white Flyers deck, is a creature that can tap down other creatures and sort of buy you more time.
Sort of master decoy variant.
Exactly, Rich, yep.
Okay, so those are the commons. What about the uncommons then? Now, you're not going to see these as often, of course. Around about 2 and a bit commons per draft. You're more sort of in the 1 if you're lucky on the uncommons, and you've got your Drogskull Shieldmate there. You see the Geist of the Archives. And Nabelgast Herald, that's a card I find really fun.
Yeah, and here's a little bit of that Spirit Tribal that we were talking about at higher rarities. Flash Flyer enters the battlefield, and whenever it or another spirit enters the battlefield, you can tap a creature an opponent controls. So
that card, Geist of the Archives, is a card that wouldn't have existed in Magic a few years ago. This idea of Scribe being an ability that you've kind of created to go on plenty of cards, and it's so popular with players. I mean, that card, a 0/4 defender for 3, not very exciting at all. Put that Scry 1, and you're like, I could get to Scry like 5-6 times before they kill it, and 4 toughness is a big deal.
Yeah, and you were talking about a popular ability that we want to put in many sets. That's what we call an evergreen ability. So Scry now being evergreen, we get to put it here as well.
Okay, so let's see, having seen the commons and uncommons from Eldritch Moon, what does that mean for Shadows over Innistrad? Let's add those together and show you the top commons and uncommons in blue-white there. So there you see you've got the Cathar, Angelic Purge removal, Puncturing Light, Sleep Paralysis, again, plenty of removal. And then on the uncommon side, anything that stands out there, Ian?
Yeah, I guess I'd highlight Silver Strike here as a great card for this blue-white Flyers deck. Being able to destroy an attacking creature and gain life really helps you win a race when you're attacking the air with spirits.
Okay, so that is white to blue spirits. Let's move on to our second color pair, and this is going to be blue-black as we move round the color wheel. And, well, blue-black, what is that about? Well, if you ask BBD, he'll tell you it's about zombies.
Yeah, and there's kind of a couple things going on with this deck here, Rich. At the surface level, it's a zombie deck, right? You want to have lots of zombie creatures, a couple rewards for having zombie creatures. But at its heart, the play style of this deck is like a slow and grindy control deck with a lot of self-mill, which means putting cards from your library into your graveyard and then taking advantage of that in various ways.
Okay, so let's see where those cards work out for you. Here are the top commons: Wretched Griff, Boon of Emrakul removal, Ingenious Scab, Certain Death removal, and Midnight Scavengers.
Yeah, and I'll actually highlight the removal here. Even though both Boon of Emrakul and Certain Death are a little bit on the slower side, that's exactly what this deck wants to be able to protect itself and win a late game.
Yeah, I love Certain Death for sure. What about the uncommons then in blue and black? There you see them.
Yeah, again, more removal spells. Murder's a card that just goes great in any deck. And Ruthless Disposal, another card I want to highlight, has just been a very talked about black card. You can take out 2 creatures at once, and maybe you get some synergy with Madness going on as well.
And you know what? Even if you don't, sometimes you have a spare land floating about. I mean, it's still a good card. It's just either a good card or a really good card. It's
Right.
never a bad card.
Yep.
Really like that card. All right, what does Shadows over Innistrad bring to the mix then in the drafts that you are succeeding with on Magic Online?
Yeah, I mean, Kindly Stranger is a card that stands out here, something that helps you win a late game and also benefits you for self-mill, as we talked about, putting extra cards in your graveyard, achieving Delirium.
So that is blue-black. That's what you're doing in your Magic Online drafts. Here's black-red, and it's vampires.
So again, it's about the vampire creature type, but it's also about the madness mechanic. Vampire decks tend to want to be very aggressive, getting on the board early, and using what we call discard outlets, abilities that allow you to discard cards to use your madness cards at a discounted cost.
Okay, so I've got a little red flag coming up, which is, we've said the word aggressive, and we've also talked already this morning that the format is at least slower, may not be slow, but is that something you should be worried about when you're thinking about going black-red? I mean, how easy is it to get that aggressive deck?
I won't say it's something you should be worried about, but it's something you should be thinking about in how you craft your plan for winning the game. I think with Eldritch Moon slowing down the format a little bit, making it a little bit more defensive, you're less likely to win a game by just playing out a bunch of small creatures and blindly attacking with them, and you're going to want to leverage your synergies and a later game plan a little bit more than you did in Shadows over Innistrad.
Okay, so let's put that deck together for you. Let's look at the commons. And there you are, you've got your outlet of Olivia's Dragoon, you've got Madness with Alchemist Greeting, obviously a quality removal spell in Galvanic Bombardment and Boon of Emrakul. And Brazen Wolves is a card that people have really taken the shine to.
Yeah, just a fantastic red creature that goes in any deck. I do want to highlight Olivia's Dragoon here at the top. This is a card that looks relatively innocuous, but it just does so much for this deck. Between being a vampire and being a mana-less discard outlet, it really lets you leverage your madness spells. Definitely a card to look out for if you're in this archetype.
So those are the commons. Let's take a look at the uncommons. There we go. Incendiary Flow, love that card. Savage Alliance, yes, ditto. Murder, well, of course. Smoldering Werewolf and Markov Crusader you see there on the right. And boy, is that lifelink back-breaking sometimes.
Yeah, it sure is. That's definitely tends to be an underrated ability, and it's really, really strong on this card.
How hard is it to make a card like Incendiary Flow in a space where it's a cheap card, it's a red removal spell, like the 3 damage has been around forever, you've got your Incinerates and so on. Is that quite a narrowed space?
Yes and no. I mean, it's narrow in the sense that it's important to get it right. It's not narrow in the sense that, red gets burn spells, and in each different set, we try to give you different variations on it that make sense within the context of this set. Right. And here, the exiling clause on that really does have a huge impact in this format.
For sure. All right, let's take a look at the Shadows over Innistrad cards that are going into these, your top commons and uncommon picks for Shadows over Innistrad in the black-red combination.
Yeah, Fiery Temper, as always, an excellent red removal spell. Up there at uncommon, Lightning Axe, something that goes really, really well with all the Madness cards. You can look through this list and just see removal, Madness Outlet, Madness card. That's really the story of this deck.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's black-red. We move round the color wheel once again. Let's go to red and green. Let's take a look at that color pair for you. What are they trying to do, Ian?
These are the werewolves, Rich. In Shadows over Innistrad, werewolves had a transform mechanic where if no spells were played, they transform. So you want to kind of get them down early, maybe pass the turn to transform them, get in a lot of damage. In Eldritch Moon, the werewolves behave a little bit differently. They actually have mana cost payments to transform into Eldrazi. And those two mechanics actually pair really well together because you can play out a few of your Shadows werewolves, play an Eldritch Moon werewolf, and then instead of playing a spell, transform your Eldritch Moon werewolf, and so too will all your Shadows werewolves transform.
Yeah, it is very, very neat the way this has developed over the block. So let's take a look at the commons then for red and green. A card I love, Ulvenwild Captive, a card that BDM loves, Vilden Pack Outcast. The Brazen Wolves are there again. Prey Upon, you'd expect to see, and Galvanic Bombardment. Again, let's go straight to the uncommons and take a look. And Ian, what stands out to you here in the top 5 uncommons?
I think Clear Shot really stands out to me. Just a really powerful card. that allows your werewolves a lot of flexibility in combat. Your creatures tend to be bigger than your opponents, so it can really, yeah, just help you dominate the board.
I love cards like Smoldering Werewolf as well that give you an option to not play it when it looks like you're meant to. In theory, you just, yeah, well, I've got no other 4-drop, I'll play it. And you're like, well, have I got a target for it right now? Am I going to get greedy? I've got 1, but I want to wait for 2. That's not often the right answer, but it is an answer. Yeah, I love cards that give you that sort of play. It's not often going to decide a game necessarily, but it just edges you a little bit forward, and that's a super thing in that. What about Shadows over Innistrad then? How do the red-green werewolves from ago deal with the red-green werewolves of right now? Let's take a look for you. There we are.
Yeah, I mean, you can see cards like Duskwatch Recruiter, as always, just a fantastic card, both in a werewolf deck and a non-werewolf deck. Most of these here actually being the werewolves themselves, which is great to see, really highlights the strength of this deck is in its powerful creatures.
Yeah, for sure. Well, they're werewolves, they are powerful, and we've got one more color pair to bring you today. It is green-white, so let's take a look. It's the humans.
Yeah, this is sort of the white weenie deck of the format in a way. You're playing out lots of small creatures, and they're achieving strength through numbers. I really like that description there. As also mentioned here, equipment tends to go really well in this set with some of the equipment actually calling out the human creature type.
All right, let's look at the commons then in green-white, and there you see them.
Yep, again here, Sigardian Priest doubles as both a human, can get in for some early damage, but then also taps down your opponent's large creatures, lets your other humans get through as well.
Talk to me about Desperate Sentry, because that's an unusual card, because as soon as you start off with 2 and a white for a 1 and 2, that's obviously horrible. But it actually leads to an awful lot of interesting gameplay.
Yeah, absolutely. It pairs really well with equipment as well, as something to highlight there.
All right, uncommons are up next. Let's take a look at those very quickly for you. And you'll see their clear shot, Hamlet Captain, the Stag, Faith Unbroken, and Subjugator Angel. And then once we get to Shadows over Innistrad, what does that bring to the mix? Let's show you what Shadows over Innistrad is doing here. There we are. Anything therein?
Yeah, Thraben Inspector, a card that's often underrated, but just a great way to get extra humans on the battlefield, recoup some cards, works excellently with equipment, really shows you kind of what the deck is all about.
All right, so those are the allied colors here, and we are gearing up for the next round. So those are the allied color pairs on the Magic Online Draft Archetypes.